What does that line, this trophy, and the city of Seattle all have in common? They're all elements used in the giallo-inspired thriller Malignant, the new horror genre bender directed, co-produced, and co-written by James Wan, who you may know from other movies such as Saw, Insidious, and The Conjuring. Before we get into this video, I should mention that the review and any possible spoilers will be after the plot description, so don't worry, I'll try not to ruin any surprises for you. And over the course of the video, if it starts to pique your interest, please slash those like and subscribe buttons, especially if you're a horror fan. Malignant stars Annabelle Wallis, who also coincidentally stars in the movie Annabelle. She plays Madison Mitchell, a pregnant woman whose life is severely disrupted after her abusive husband bashes her head into a wall. The trauma invites a dark entity into her life, killing her husband and causing an unfortunate miscarriage. We soon are introduced to Madison's sister, Sydney, played by Maddie Hassan. She stays with Madison to help comfort her, but soon finds out a little family secret. They are not actually blood sisters. Madison reveals to her that she was adopted at the age of 8. Meanwhile, Madison has a vision of a woman being murdered by what appears to be the same being that had traumatized her earlier. And this is where we get our first glimpse of this most excellent murder weapon. This homicide prompts two detectives, Shaw and Moss, to investigate a possible link between this murder and the death of Madison's husband, a case they were already examining prior. Unfortunately for Madison, her night terrors are not over, as she has another vision of a different person being murdered. She tells Sydney the vision was so real that it's as if she was there witnessing it through the killer's eyes, but this time she could see its face. She goes to Detective Shaw and Moss to explain. Her details are so precise that she's able to name the building and floor the victim lived on. The detectives are highly skeptical, of course, well, at least one of them, but they entertain the idea to investigate the location. And lo and behold, it is there they come upon the bloody remains of the mutilated corpse. Afterward, the killer uses a strange ability to communicate through electromagnetic waves to contact Madison through her cell phone. She's terrified by how much he knows about her and her past. And it is here we get to know the killer's name.
His name is Gabriel.
Shook by this revelation and realizing her lack of credibility to the detectives, the sisters try to do some digging. A visit to the mother reveals a past that's been suppressed deep into her memory, giving us a possible clue to the origin of Gabriel. Back at the precinct, Detective Shaw's research uncovers the history of the last two victims. They were both doctors working on an experimental case from the same clinic, and the third man was part of the team. Shaw does a quick search of his address and makes a mad dash to his place, but too late. It's already a bloodbath, literally. A chase ensues through the streets and into the undergrounds of Seattle, but Gabriel's strange speed and agility is much too elusive. After this incident, Detective Shaw then reveals to Madison a key to her mysterious childhood. She was the case study involved in an experimental research hospital, and the three victims were her doctors. Shaw has her sit with a hypnotherapist to dig up some of these repressed memories, shot in a style very similar to another Wan film. Detective Moss, already annoyed by the absurdity of the whole thing, places Madison under arrest after an unidentified woman falls through the Madison ceiling. During the interrogation, though, Gabriel again makes his presence known. But still not convinced, Moss has her locked up anyways. Meanwhile, Sydney does a little further investigation of her own and takes a road trip to the site of her sister's repressed childhood, the ominous Simeon Research Center. She digs up a few old cassettes and brings them back to Mom's. This is when we find out the identity of the woman who was held hostage in Madison's attic. And they watch in horror as we get to see the true nature and origin of Gabriel. So, what did yours truly think of Malignant? Well, since it's my first ever movie review, let me just start by saying that I'm a pretty easily entertained dude. I like everything from the classic black and white Universals, to the cheesy B-rated grindhouse schlockfests, to the new modern elevated horror. So I am by no means what you would call a movie snob, but it doesn't prevent me from pointing out the flaws. So with that being said, I found Malignant to be very entertaining. In typical James Wan fashion, the cinematography was exactly the way I like a horror flick to look. Dark, dull colors with ominous shots of structures, along with slow zooming scenes to help build suspense. And I'm a huge special effects guy, both practical and digital. And this movie was a great combination of the two. With visual effects done by Industrial Light and Magic, and practical and makeup done by Spectral Motion and Fractured Effects, Wan really went all out on the $40 million budget to give us a film that was action-packed, bloody in parts, and downright fun. Many have said this film is a homage to the Italian giallo films of the 70s and 80s, and I thought this was abundantly clear in some of the shots of Gabriel and his ingeniously fashioned trophy blade. But at the same time, it takes a bit of influence from a lot of horror films in general, films like Basket Case and other body horrors. As far as acting, the main cast was relatively convincing in selling the story, considering how ludicrous and far-fetched the story turned out to be. Annabelle Wallis did a good job in performing the struggles of her mentally tortured character, and the creepy Gabriel movements and stunts were performed by two different people actually, both a dancer and a contortionist. The detective characters, on the other hand, seem to suffer from some of the same tropes that we've seen in a ton of other horror and mystery films. I mean, how many times have we seen the old good cop, bad cop duo, where one is this clean-spoken and understanding type, while the other is the tough, brass, no-nonsense type who's so overly suspicious that they fail to believe in anything outside of their own understanding.
Your imaginary friend.
There were a few other failures of logic in the plot, but ultimately, this is first and foremost a horror film, regardless of what others are trying to classify it as. So you have to expect a drastic departure from reality. But it was a horror film that was willing to do something a bit different and cross between subgenres, such as action, science fiction, suspense, and body horror, which makes it truly unique. So, if you don't like films such as Basket Case, Brain Damage, and Imprint, as well as James Wan's previous films, I don't think this movie's going to be for you. However, if you're the type who can put aside all suspension of disbelief in the absurd, and who appreciates a fun, kick-ass horror flick which is both visually and creatively appealing, then I say to you,
check it out!